I'm Rubin Zeman. I'm from North Macedonia, director of the Center for Advanced Research and a scientific fellow here in the Institute of Advanced Studies in Cusack. It's a big pleasure to mine today to be the chair of the panel regarding the Balkans. Actually, the Rethinking Political Imaginaries in Contemporary Balkans, Power, Fragmentation, Continuity and Challenges of the European Union Integration. I'm pleased that we have here very competitive and smart and wise panelists. First of all, we have three beautiful ladies. Dzenita here, she's from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Then we have Daniela Vukovic-Calasan, she is from Montenegro, from Podgorica. Selma Muhic Dizdarevic. I don't see Dizdarevic in there. She is actually from the Charles University in Prague. Actually, she is from Belgrade, from Serbia. Then we have Kristian Nielsen. And you are from?
Originally from Denmark, then by way of Bosnia, and now in Corvinus in Budapest, so a little all over the place.
Okay.
I might add Estonia and the UK and the US as well, so, you know, just name the place I've been
European identity. And by a friend of mine, Dimitar, who is a director of the think tank Eurothink from Skopje, North Macedonia. And he is also the formal fellow here in iASK. So because we are late, and some of you probably are religious, after this session we have to go to the church, we will cut our presentation to 10 to 12 minutes, because to lead the discussion. After that, I will give a little bit introduction about the topic, and then I will give the floor first to Kristian, then to Dzenita, to Dimitar, to Daniela, and later to Selma. So the peace and stability of the Balkans, a region situated at the crossroads of the Western and Eastern Europe, and historically framed as a meeting point between the Orient and Occident, have long been contingent upon the stability of larger neighboring geopolitical entities. Throughout the 19th and 20th century, international agreements concerning the Balkans were predominantly shaped by the strategic interests and negotiation of the great powers. Key diplomatic milestones such as Congress of Berlin, the Treaty of Versailles, Yalta Conference were products of such negotiation, while others such as the London Conference, the Treaty of Bucharest, the Dayton Agreement were concluded under the direct influence or supervision of these external actors and superpowers. The durability of these agreements has historically been vulnerable to shift in a broader international order. When relations among the non-Balkans great powers deteriorated or become antagonistic, the resulting instability frequently undermined the existing treaties, often leading to unrest or military conflicts within the Balkan region. This recurring patterns highlights the extent to which the Balkans' internal stability has been intervened with the geopolitical dynamics of external powers. The fall of Berlin Wall and the subsequent triumph of the liberal democracy, unfortunately we heard yesterday that also the liberal democracy now is in a big crisis, over the communism in the Balkans, unshared the dirigent conceptualization of ethnicity, nationhood and cultural diversity. Today the region presents a complex political landscape. 5 states, Greece, Bulgaria, Serbia, Croatia and Albania, primarily vary in degrees to the model of nation state, while 4 others, North Macedonia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro and Kosovo, are attempting to construct civil, multi-ethnic statehood models. This division, however, is not absolute. In practice, most states do not strictly conform to a single model. The boundaries between civic and ethnic national frameworks are fluid and often blurry to daily governments and policy making. Nevertheless, the prevailing political configuration of the Balkans reflects a broader tendency toward the nation-state's paradigm, accompanied by process of political fragmentation that run parallel to and at times of tension with ongoing efforts toward globalization and European integration. Yet, the diverse and multicultural nature of the Balkan reveals the limitations of the nationalist frameworks in achieving full social integration. Despite the symbolic and emotional appeals of nationhood, such models often fail to guarantee equality before the law, equitable access to opportunities, social cohesion, and the overall well-being of all citizens. This shortcoming stands in contrast to the fundamental principles of the European integration project, which emphasizes inclusion, human rights, and democratic pluralism. So this is my brief introduction to the topic. I will now give the floor to Kristian Nielsen.
Thank you, Ruben. My presentation, if that one can load, and if I can have the slide changer as well, it's all the way over there. Right, so, well, my presentation is going to focus on this wonderful concept of stabilitocracy in the Western Balkans that the European Union is quite guilty of. Or so we thought, because there, apologies for the quality, it's a private photo, but if you look very closely, you can see Marta Kors, the European Commissioner for Enlargement. And this picture was taken at a conference in Brussels last month, where she gave a keynote address, and a colleague from Serbia got up and asked the question of whether she, what her comment was to those who said that the EU engages in these stabilitocratic practices. And Marta Kors, she almost fell off the stage, and she said, "I have never heard anyone say that about the European Union." So I guess that ends my presentation. Or otherwise, maybe I should talk a little bit about it, because I had actually heard it before. But just to get the definition clear, so we can say governments in partner or applicant states that where you might say the semblance of democracy, the rule of law, is only on the absolute surface, and right under that surface lurks authoritarianism and state capture. And how it applies to the European Union is, of course, in the fact that it's not only being tolerated, in some cases it's even being supported, because, at least that's how the theory goes, these authoritarians, they are the ones who can deliver stability and security. And again, it would be a short presentation if I completely agreed, so let's move on. Now, of course, I would be the first to acknowledge that every now and then one has to be pragmatic, and yeah, in the short term, a lot of this may be true, but in the longer term, most of such things turn out to be problematic. And of course, it links very much to state capture, so let's just define that too. You can have a political party, political clan, whatever, but when it embeds itself completely into the state structures, that it cannot be removed, when the state serves the rulers rather than the rulers of the state just having it on loan for the time being. And that goes to everything, the courts, the media, public administration, state-owned businesses. They can also even translate into privileged positions in the private sector, because some elements of the private sector are not being disturbed by the state, whereas others have the state up there, whatever, all the time. And you may still have elections. They may, in fact, be free, meaning that you can run, you can speak, but it's not fair, because if the media is totally against it, against certain parties totally promoting others, it's not a level playing field. So you may not necessarily have to do the crudest things like stuffing ballot boxes, although it should be said there are those in the Western Balkans who are not adverse to that either, but it certainly is not fair. What characterizes all captured states is that ultimately, sooner or later, economic growth is hampered by it. They all tend to sooner or later underperform economically because of corruption and mismanagement. And that's because decisions are not primarily taken for what's good for the country, but rather what's good for us, the rulers, the ruling elite, the clan. And loyalty matters more than competence. And here I would introduce a little word that I had to learn when I came to Bosnia. It's, and I apologize for the translation, Dzenita was the one who taught me the word, and she always complains that my pronunciation is not Bosnian enough, but uhleb, it's a weird word because literally translates as in bread, not in bread, but in the bread. And the, thank you. See, that's what Dzenita also says that I can't say properly.
You make it sound Serbian, not Bosnian.
I know. Guilty. But okay. Well, but how it was defined to me was that there are a lot of people who are in government positions, ministries, agencies, whatever, or state-owned companies, who have primarily arrived in their jobs because of their political connections, not because they were uniquely suited for the jobs, but because they were connected, and therefore that's how they got the jobs. And so therefore there is that added connotation that they lack qualifications, competences. They may even be outright incompetent, these people. But that's a word one has to learn. Another word is stela, which that's very complicated to explain, but maybe somebody else will take that one over. But these things are very prevalent. So in the Western Balkans, this has always been a problem. But today, right now, Serbia, Bosnia and Herzegovina are the key examples. They are absolutely, both of them, captured states. Serbia, it's very obvious who precisely it is. But in the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, it's a three-way split, but nonetheless, it's very much the case. The others, you might say, to varying extents, are trying to sort of shake up the system and move out of this, but all of them have, at various points or others, been captured states. Nobody has been immune from it in any of these things. Montenegro, how long was one man in charge of that country? 30 years, more or less. The list goes on for all of them. There are definitely those who try, but to get out of it, that I definitely do acknowledge. But it's also the case that all of that, even the other ones are still fragile to it, could slip back into it too. And it's too. Robert Austin, he's left the building. That's a shame, because I was actually struck by one thing he said when he said leaders don't take bold action. Well, I would also go as far as to say that at least in some of these countries, why would they take bold action? They don't want to. It's not that they can't or that they have somehow just missed the opportunity. No, they have absolutely not wanted to. Because why would they? What does the EU actually offer that's very appealing to an entrenched autocrat? Rule of law, what do you need it for? Anti-corruption measures, I mean, after all, the whole system is based on corruption, so why would you want to shake it? If you are the autocrat, if you are the one whose political clan runs the show, now you can say ordinary people benefit from transparency and anti-corruption measures. The rulers do not. The rule of law is, in the Russian sense, the rule of law, that is that you can use the law to punish people, but the rule of law in the Western sense is that it protects the people against the state. Why would you want that if you're the entrenched autocrat? So there is that dichotomy between the elites and ordinary people, and of course one can ask from that perspective, what leverage does the EU actually have even towards some of these entrenched elites? Because what can they actually offer to make them change their way? It's positive conditionality becomes difficult. Then it's negative conditionality that one has to reach for, but that's also problematic. But why is it that stabilitocracy can seem so appealing from the European Union? Well, you can say certain things in theory the authoritarians can deliver on, keep the conflicts under wraps, the autocrats, they may not rock the boat. Well, that's a problematic assumption in the first place. Look at Milorad Dodik in Bosnia and Herzegovina. He has, so much of Western policy for the past 20 years has been, keep him on board. You may all have heard the beautiful expression that it's better to have him inside the tent pissing out than having him outside the tent pissing in. Well, I would argue that he has spent the last several years pissing inside the tent, from inside and doing it inside. Sorry for my language. But you can also say, well, has the Serbian autocrats, have they really tried very hard to facilitate deals with Kosovo? I would say not. They have, I can see that you find that as a nice understatement. And, well, in other ways you can say, what else can they deliver? Well, if you want to exploit the rare earths deposits without too many environmental complaints, well, who better than an autocrat to make the environmental lobby go away and override those protests that emerge? Vucic can deliver. maybe. Migration, stop migrants from coming to Europe without worrying too much about the human rights aspects. Autocrats can deliver. Vucic, Erdogan, you know, the list goes on. They can deliver for the European Union. So as long as the money keeps flowing, the autocrats don't ask too many questions, and we are very good at not asking questions either. So there's, of course, all of that. The problem, of course, and I want to sort of also argue stability seeking, it's not always wrong, but it can also be problematic. If one actually has certain values of one's own, one easily gets to sacrifice them. And what happens the day when the autocrat is not as securely in power as they once were, then you may very easily have found yourself on the wrong side of history. And then suddenly you may find yourself out of favor with whoever comes after the autocrats. So it is a problematic concept all the same. But even so, I also want to sort of turn a little bit to the potential EU members, because after all, we always tend to blame the EU, but of course, just to take a little bit from the Burto statement, credible reforms actually being dedicated to the European values and principles, necessary reforms in the interest of their own people. I think one could also ask the question of whether the Western Balkans are always really trying their hardest. It's easy to blame the European Union, but apart from North Macedonia, which I frankly acknowledge they've been very badly treated, but in all of this, but the rest, I'm not so sure, really. And moreover, here's just a few little rankings just to drive home that point. So here, in all of them, I have taken the worst performing EU country and then the Western Balkan countries. So Transparency International, only one country is worse than the best performing of the Western Balkan states. Ease of doing business, well, at least here, I cannot explain why Malta is so lowly ranked, but there at least, North Macedonia is clearly doing something right, according to this. Rule of law, again, there's several problematic candidates, but here, Freedom House, which was the one Robert Austin was also referring to, measuring political and civil liberties, and even if we say Hungary is an outlier, then the second lowest ranked EU member is significantly outperforming even the best performing of the Western Balkan states. Now, of the top 4 Western Balkan states, they have more or less stood still in the past few years on these rankings. Serbia declined to a score of 56. Believe it or not, Bosnia actually improved to get to 52. That doesn't say much for where they started from, does it? That's part of the problem. So to get to the bottom line, the whole stabilitocracy aspect is very ingrained in the EU's entire approach to the Western Balkans. And obviously, I think one cannot absolve them from having to do the hard work if they actually want to join, and they have a lot to do. On the other hand, it's also the case that the European Union has to stand for its own values and do so consistently, even if that would actually put even further burdens on the Western Balkan states if the EU really stood for its values. Because let's be clear, there's no way Serbia would even be accepted as an EU candidate today, the way things are. Their performance on all the Copenhagen criteria is too poor. Similarly, there's no way Bosnia-Herzegovina should have been accepted as an EU candidate. And I say that because I also wrote an op-ed on EU Observer saying don't give candidate status, but Commission never listens. Yes, and I will listen to you in just a split second. So I would lastly just say it is a flawed approach, because whereas one can say North African countries, they're always going to be across the sea, they're never going to be members. So yeah, maybe, and we cannot solve every problem in the world. So maybe the stabilitocracy approach works there. The Western Balkans, on the other hand, they are actually in the middle of the continent, and it is problematic for the long term that they're not moving nearer to EU accession. So how exactly does the EU move forward? That's harder to say. It's always easier to criticize than to come up with a solution. But at least one should start from one's own value and long-term interests. And long-term interests are not usually pursued by exclusively adopting short-term measures. So that's where I'll leave it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, I'm the Bosnian of the group, and usually I am, when it comes to these panels, round tables on the Western Balkans, I am the negative one. So for those of you who have seen Harry Potter movies, I am the mentor of the panel, but I do not want to kill joy. I am pro-EU. I am pro-Western Balkan countries joining the EU eventually, but we are just not getting there. So I am actually glad that today I'm not the only one. But so my presentation will be a little bit from the economic point of view on what Kristian was talking about. Basically, I will be talking about the Western Balkans path towards EU membership. We have been on that path for now 22 years since the Thessaloniki summit. And when you think about it, Central and Eastern European countries went through the transition process in less than 15 years, and we are in that process for the past 30 years. So progress is slow, and reforms often lack depth and real impact. We have several problems, political and economic in the region. Political affect economic issues. We have populism, we have weak institutions, and short-term politics that are basically the goal of our political elites, to just get to the next election, to win the next election, not to make any changes. In the meantime, we have another problem, critical raw materials. Who's gonna get them and how? So, our path towards EU membership is paved with reforms. It's a steep road, and ideally, if we transform, if we adopt those reforms, we will become members of the EU. But the real problem is that politicians in the Western Balkans are acting like reforms should be done for the EU, for Brussels, not for the people who live in the Western Balkans. If you read EU reports, now we can say EU reports for every country except Kosovo, progress is slow, or in some areas there is even no progress. So it means that reforms are superficial. They are selective, what suits political elites. So it's performance, it's not transformation. 2 years ago, I participated at a round table, and a prominent Bosnian politician was there. And they said that a long time ago, the EU gave the list of reforms, but Bosnia and Herzegovina wanted to do them in their order, but the EU demanded its order. And Bosnian and Herzegovinian politicians couldn't do that in the EU's order, so they didn't do any reforms. Later, an international official, ambassador actually confirmed that actually it was just a recommendation. The EU did not insist, but that was an excuse for Bosnian politicians not to change. In the Western Balkans, politics are theater. Why? Because we have populists. There are two types of populism, economic and political. Economic can be good in the short run. That was the case of the Central and Eastern European countries, because in the short run, politicians will focus on achieving economic growth and some economic stability to win the next election. But unfortunately, in the Western Balkans, we only have a political populism, which means that our politicians are creating enemies all the time, whether it is other ethnicities, whether it's each other, whether they are international players, you name it, we have that in the Western Balkans. So we have both left and right-wing populism. While they're fighting, and not conducting reforms, we have a consequence, as a consequence that people leave. For example, it is estimated, only an estimation because we don't have real numbers, that 100,000 people leave Bosnia and Herzegovina every year to go to the EU. Public service erode, we have economic stagnation. So at least in the Central and Eastern European countries, there was economic growth. We have growth rates lower than Central and Eastern European countries, which should not be the case. Now, we have a new obsession in the Western Balkans. How? Can you speak directly? Okay, sorry. Now, we have a new obsession in the Western Balkans, critical raw materials. I think you have all heard about the lithium case in Serbia. Now we will have that in Bosnia and Herzegovina as well. What is the problem with critical raw materials? Yes, they sound good. We are at the crossroads between the green transition and being stuck in a coal-based electricity production, but we have a problem that we have weak, inefficient, extractive institutions. How will these institutions, weak institutions, affect CRM market exploitation? First, low resource rent. Resource rent in Serbia is only 1/4 of that in Norway, and Norway should be our role model. If you have weak institutions, it means that you have corruption, judicial inefficiency, low property rights protections, poor environmental protection, zero transparency. What will be the consequence? The consequence will be that because we don't have infrastructure and technology, we need foreign direct investment to extract critical raw materials. But what kind of investors are we going to attract? Those who do not care about our environment, that will leave us with polluted air, soil, and water, and that will export raw materials at a low price. So we need critical raw materials for our sustainable development, but at this system, it will be unsustainable. As a result, we will be in the resource trap. Resource trap is a term that describes countries that have natural resources but have low growth rates. That is the fate of many African countries. These countries are dependent on raw material exports. But what is the problem? When you export raw materials, you export low-value goods. You do not export final products. You actually import those final products. It has a negative effect on your GDP growth and current account deficit. Because Western Balkan economies would be price takers, they would be small players in the world market of critical raw materials, it means that the prices of our goods would be dependent on the decision of large players and very volatile market. So we would be in a situation where we would not be value creators, but we would also have low growth. What is the alternative here? Thankfully, we are not pioneers in this region. We have, for example, Norway to look up to, not the Netherlands. I'll explain now why. Norway was prepared for their natural resources, for the exploitation of natural resources. Norway had efficient institutions. It increased the rent. It created a fund that was absorbing the negative effects of foreign market. And it managed to contain low inflation. On the other hand, the Netherlands in the 70s focused based its economy on natural resources, and it meant that the rest of the economy was stagnating. It was affected. It was not diversified, and because of that, we now have the term Dutch disease, which is, it should be a warning, not a model. But what does this demand, the Norwegian model? Political will. For everything in the Western Balkans, you need political will. Public trust, transparency, long-term planning, and reforms that will be for the citizen, not, again, for the EU, for Brussels. So, What is the conclusion? We are not ready for EU membership. I'm so sorry to say that. I'm sorry that the situation is like that. I would love that, firstly, my country is ready, that we are progressing, but we are not ready for ourselves. That's why people are leaving. So what we can conclude from what I can conclude from my analysis, I'm not going to go into details now whether the EU wants Western Balkans or not. The EU at this moment is not blocking us. We are blocking ourselves from EU membership. Again, reforms must be for citizens, not for Brussels. What do we have? We have problems. We have populism. We have politicians who are blaming each other, and we are having quick fixes. Basically, what we are doing is just box ticking, and that's it, to say that we did something. The politicians will be relying on raw materials. I know from the experience of my country that they already started looking for investors that will just give us money. Again, when you have populist leaders, that is not a good thing. So raw materials will not save our economies without strong institutions. So what real change demands is political will, public trust, and reform from within. Therefore, we can say at this moment that we are not stuck, we are just unprepared, and we can reverse the situation. Thank you.
It's good now. It's good, right? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ruben. Thank you for being included in this panel and in this summer university. It's great being back here. I actually counted last night how many I have attended, and I think this is my 10th as a participant or organizer of the summer university. So I was originally preparing a presentation that was supposed to answer the questions in the description of the panel. But I realized it's going to be very repetitive of what was already being said. So I was provoked by some of these discussions in the morning panel and decided to change my topic. And I was thinking, especially when listening about the Serbian student protest, I was thinking of the question, how do you actually kill civil society in democratic terms? I want to talk about this topic through the example of the reactions to the fire that happened in Macedonia in March of this year. Before I go into the cases, I want to give you my conceptual framework. In 2022, I was working with colleagues from Bosnia and Herzegovina. We were doing research that wanted to answer the question, how do citizens respond to feelings of injustice based on corruption and state capture? And we did ethnographic research in 9 municipalities in each North Macedonia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, talked to various types of people, activists, politicians, etc. And we came up with a model, a little bit based on Hirschman's exit, voice, and loyalty model, with our own spin of it. And we call it the get out, sell out, tune out, or freak out. So when citizens have a feeling that the country is corrupt, that there is a state capture, what do they do? How do they react? What we see in the Western Balkans a lot is first getting out. And almost everyone was talking about this. You want to become a part of the European Union, so you just go to the European Union. You don't bring the European Union to yourself, where you think that you will have a better system for you and your family. And we have these huge numbers of out-migration from the region. The second one is sell out. So this is just, I'm aware that the system is corrupt. I'm aware what the politicians are doing, what the political parties are doing, how the business, organized crime, political parties nexus operates, but I cannot do anything to fix it, so I better use it. And then we have what Kristian was talking about, the uhljeb and the stela, so getting employment from the political parties in power, getting good tenders, etc. So they just become a part of the system. Then we have the tuning out, and this is rejecting politics outright because from a feeling of lack of power or lack of imagination. And we see a lot of these demobilized citizens in all of our countries in the Western Balkans who say, I don't want to do anything with politics. Maybe they work for foreign companies. They don't feel directly affected by what is going on, or they choose to ignore all the negative aspects of living. So they work as apolitical subjects. And finally, we have the freak out. And we have two subdivisions of the freak out. One is the negative radicalization going into extremism, and we see this in far-right extremism and also in Islamic extremism in our region. And the other one is the positive radicalization, which we saw in North Macedonia with the colorful revolution in 2016-17. And now I'm going back to the cases with the colorful revolution. So this was an example that we use as a positive radicalization, where when citizens opened the space for new political imagination when faced with what the European Union called in 2015 a captured state. And they formed, in an otherwise ethnically divided country, they formed inter-ethnic coalitions, they formed coalitions with political parties, with the formal part of civil society, in order to change the system. Unfortunately, the government changed, but the system did not. And this was a great disappointment of the people who invested a lot of their time and energy into achieving this, and the slogan was no justice, no peace. So we had social democrats that continued many of the corrupt practices that were happening in the country. And this caused us to move this very significant segment of civil society from the positive radicalization back again into the moving out and tuning out of politics. And we had several of these, I can draw several conclusions from this case. First of all, that there was a great investment on the side of the civil society, but not a feeling of victory afterwards. Then there were expectations of good allies in political parties, which also did not happen. The EU first as an object of desire, and second as an ally as well. But what we saw in the years after the change of government in 2017 was disappointment after disappointment from the EU. So this significant part of civil society, let's call it progressive part of civil society, lost the EU as something desirable. In some of the research that we did in opinion polls, we saw a 20% drop in support for the EU, or at least to the question, do you think membership in the EU would be a good thing? So within 1 year, we had a 20% drop after the Bulgarian veto. And we have a situation of depression, disillusionment, defeatism. And then we had this horrible catastrophe in March of this year in Kočani, when in a fire in a discotheque, 62 mostly young people died, some of them minors, over 220 people with horrible lifelong injuries. And we saw a reaction from the government. So this is a comparative case to what was happening in Serbia with the train station. That it was all a result of systemic corruption that enabled this to happen. But we have this situation of completely disillusioned civil society. There were some attempts to mobilize and to organize, especially amongst young people, to at least exert pressure on the government to properly do away with what was happening. And there was a slogan, who is next? The system is next. This did not happen. The government was extremely successful, out of fear from a spillover effect from Serbia, in demobilizing the citizens with negative campaigns, with going back to populist politics of us versus them, of national traitors who are going to now being called necrophiliac if you go out to protest and to demand justice, to calls for violence against protesters on social media. So this was happening in both social media and on mainstream pro-governmental media. So even that small part of civil society that still felt enthusiastic to actually do something lost in its enthusiasm. And currently we have the situation that only members of families of those who were killed or injured are actually protesting and demanding justice. So we have this situation of civil society that is pretty much killed, with partial help from the European Union, I have to say, and also from the disappointment from the allies. And we have a government that is going back to its old ways of creating divisions within society and strengthening it. So I don't see a promise. And of course, this stalled process of EU integration, because we are not going to be changing the constitution anytime soon. So we have the civil society has nothing really to aspire to. It does not have a feeling or feeling of agency that they can contribute something to something positive to society. So politics is again left only to political parties. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Dimitar. You are very brief. Okay, now we're going, because in the previous session it was something, some statement declaration about minority issues, which I didn't like it too much, how somebody defined it. We don't have definition for culture, for identity, so why we have to have definition of minorities? But however, we know what we are talking about. We are talking about minorities. So now Daniela and Selma, actually, they are experts that are dealing with minority issues, especially Daniela. And we will heard about EU integration process in Montenegro and something about minority issues in Montenegro. So Daniela, the floor is yours. 10 to 12 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rubin. It is a great pleasure to participate at this conference. And thank you for the invitation, of course, and for the possibility to talk about a topic I consider very important, not just from the perspective of EU integration, but also it will be very relevant even if Montenegro one day, right, sooner or later, become the member of EU. So I actually try to connect some levels and phenomena that I consider important and that are connected, of course, with the issue of ethnocultural pluralism governing, which is one of the great challenges for contemporary societies overall, not just for Montenegrin society or Western Balkan societies that are historically and traditionally ethnoculturally very heterogeneous, but also for any contemporary society, especially if we have in mind the very complex context of globalization, accelerated globalization that we are living in. And also somebody mentioned, I think in this part of discussion from previous panel, about the huge technological changes that also affect our societies. And we have to have in mind this digital space, even if we talk about ethnocultural pluralism governing, even if we talk about social cohesion, EU integration. So basically, it's not surprisingly that many relevant organizations and theoreticians that are dealing with issues of social cohesion of contemporary societies are talking about so-called digital or online social cohesion. So Montenegro is, when it comes to ethnocultural pluralism governing, first of all, a state with significant level of ethnocultural pluralism. It is the only state in Europe in which, according to the population census, the main ethnocultural community is present less than 50% in total population. So it's quite challenging to governing the ethnocultural pluralism in a successful way from the perspective of social cohesion of the community and from the perspective of EU integration, because Europeanization, as I understand it, and I think also very super interesting presentations of my colleagues in this panel, we can actually conclude that there are two levels of EU integration process. One is the connected more with politics, political will, first of all, of EU countries, European Union, and the other is actually dealing with real issues and challenges within our societies, and this is a non-ending work. It doesn't mean that possible joining to EU will make with magical stick all our issues to be solved. On the contrary. So really, it is important to somehow have in mind the specificities of the context now, not just Western Balkan, but global one as well. So Montenegro is ethnoculturally very heterogeneous state, and also it is multicultural state since 2006, 2007. In legal and political sense of meaning. So we institutionalize and we adopted model of multiculturalism as a dominant model of ethnocultural pluralism governing. And we all know that the essence of this model is actually providing integration without assimilation for all ethnocultural communities, never mind if it is minority or majority when it comes to concrete or in particular context. What is very interesting when it comes to Montenegro is that traditionally, national minorities are dominant type of ethnocultural communities in Montenegro. But now we can say that, similar maybe to Croatia, I think, if we talk about Western Balkan region, that we have a tendency of further ethnocultural pluralization. Slowly, somehow, Montenegro becomes very popular immigration or destination for immigration in the last few years. So now the latest population census from 2023, first time registered more than 2% of Russians, which is quite demographically very interesting fact. Also, I think the number of members of Turkish national community is increasing these days in Montenegro. So we have some demographic changes that will be very relevant in the future. So the question is now, that our multicultural model is accommodated just for national minorities and historically present ethnocultural communities, and that we in the future actually and basically country will deal also with ethnocultural pluralization in terms of immigration. Like I said already, it's not possible to talk about multiculturalism as a model of ethnocultural pluralism governing or even EU integration process in this matter without social cohesion, without the question how to strengthen and how to achieve social cohesion in this very complex context that we are living in. So when it comes to social cohesion, we actually talk about strengthening the resilience of the states and of the societies in every possible way and every possible manner. It also means dealing with global risks also in different dimensions, from economic dimension to the security dimension that is also very relevant, like we all can see now that it's something that we have to have in mind. So social cohesion is also one of the goals and one of the important elements that is detected by EU institutions as well, especially if we talk about some future steps in terms of using some funds that will be somehow connected with measures and mechanisms in line with strengthening social cohesion. When we talk about EU integration, we can say this is something that is commonplace, and we can find similar statement also by European officials and our political actors, but also different theoreticians dealing with EU integration, that actually Montenegro is a potentially first next EU member when it comes to Western Balkan countries. Almost 13 years, Montenegro has been negotiating EU membership, as we all know. But from 2024, we have some, let's say, in political sense of meaning, but also very clear messages from EU, let's say, officials. First of all, that the door was opened again to accelerate the final stage of the accession process, and the ambitious goal of completing the accession negotiation by the end of 2026 was defined. I don't think it's realistic, really. Now we hear about 2028 as some kind of a year of joining. So this goal was officially supported by the European Commission in the report from November 2024. What was very interesting point in this term was actually December 2024, when we closed 3 more chapters. So now, after 7 years, basically 3 more chapters are closed, which means overall 6 chapters closed and open at 33 chapters. But what I wanted to emphasize today, it's not really the question or trying to answering the question when we will join to EU, because I think that these topics that I'm dealing with will stay relevant, of course, regarding the date or the year of joining of EU. So I will talk about something that European Commission, first of all, continuously draws attention on in its reports on Montenegro, and that is the position of Roma and Egyptians. This is the example, or this is the illustration, how model of multiculturalism can basically be accommodated to the rest of the population or to the majority without somehow having in mind and paying attention on specificities of the position in socioeconomic or legal political sense of meaning, communities that are traditionally and historically excluded and are in the position not just marginalization, they are out of arena in political, in economic, in every other sense of meaning. So almost 2 decades already, almost 20 years already of implementation of this multicultural model, which is called also integration model within the EU, but also in Montenegro. We can say that according to relevant data, when we talk about context of EU, we talk about, first of all, a very relevant EU Roma strategic framework for equality, inclusion, and participation, 2020-2030, and one very relevant report of European Union Agency for Fundamental Rights from 2023, when it's clearly stated that that if overall and when overall progress of Roma integration is really somehow has been made in past 20 or 15 years, it was also it has been also very, very limited. The same conclusion can be, let's say, done for Montenegro, because after almost 20 years of implementation of multiculturalism model, we can say that Roma and Egyptians in Montenegro are most exposed to discrimination in the perception of citizens that are not Roma or Egyptians. Then that they are communities towards which ethnic distance is still more pronounced towards them compared to other ethnocultural communities. They are also most exposed to hate speech, hate crimes, and similar. So even if some progress has been made in different dimensions of integration from, for example, healthcare, education, and similar, we can say, and the conclusion is that this progress is very, very limited. I will not talk about, because I don't have time, but if somebody is interested about this topic, we can maybe discuss it in this part of presentation or the part of panel that is presented for discussion about so-called the World of Roma project or Roma industry or paternalistic approach, which means that Roma are trapped, and this is the immanent and is a tendency that is connected with integration model, in a position of permanent victims or victims in permanent need of help. So these are some tendencies that are registered in some other European context of other European countries and societies. I don't have, and we don't have any empirical research regarding Montenegro in this matter, but it's something that is very interesting and it should be discussed more in future. So reflecting the causes of the very limited reach of integration policies towards Roma, researchers and community representatives actually have led to anti-Gypsyism as a key cause of such a situation. So I'm very glad that also Selma has the presentation that will mention as well the phenomena of anti-Gypsyism, which I think it's something that is very important to have in mind when we talk about model of multiculturalism that will be applied on Roma community. I'm using it now as an umbrella term, even if we know that Egyptians as a community, they have self-definition in terms of identity specificities that is completely different than Roma identity. So until now, so basically 5 or 10 years, last 10 years, we can find in relevant European documents or in relevant documents of European institutions, like, for example, recommendation from 2021 of the Council of the European Union, that anti-Gypsyism is a fundamental cause of exclusion of Roma in basically all European societies, including Western Balkan one. So anti-Gypsyism in Montenegrin context is a great example or an illustration. What does it mean when we say that model of multiculturalism is not accommodated and it's not, let's say, built in a way that recognize the challenges and specificities of particular ethnocultural community? So in Montenegrin context,
Daniela, please conclude.
is translated officially as anti-Tsiganism, which I think it's not
Daniela, please
solution.
conclude. Please
Tell me.
conclude, yeah.
Tell me.
Please conclude.
Okay, how many minutes I have?
Time is gone already.
No, I don't think so. This is your second time. You always cut my time when we are at the conferences, which I not allowed this time. So please, I will just finish and I will take
No,
my own
really, we have witnessed 12 minutes already gone.
At least 2 more minutes.
Okay.
So when it comes to the challenge of defining anti-Gypsyism and of terminological solution, if you are interested, of course, on this topic, we can discuss why some terminological solutions are better than the other one for specific contexts. So not to go further into that question now, but what I want to emphasize here, except the fact that it's very hard to find the key elements of this phenomena, except the fact that it is specific type of racism, that is form of dehumanization, that is historically rooted, that it means homogenization and essentialization of the community, making and creating and picturing Roma people as fundamental other during different historical time. So they are foreign body. This is the all descriptions from the Montenegrin context in different time periods of our history, where Roma community is pictured as permanent guests or foreign body in the being of political social community. So there is also collectivization of the community, and there is also high degree of social acceptance, which have some explanation that I can't go further now, of course. So what is the main thing here? So if we want successful ethnocultural pluralism governing within the model of multiculturalism, then it is not good. I don't think it's also very sufficient in terms of achieving what is proclaimed goal, and that is the equality of all ethnocultural communities, minimizing disparities, cutting discrimination. We have to recognize these phenomena conceptually, terminologically, in relevant legal and political documents. What we have now, which I don't think it's a good solution, is basically promoting generalized fight against discrimination, or using the designation racial discrimination. It can't be good. Why? Because discrimination, hate speech, hate crime, stigmatization, ethno-economy, all these are manifestations of anti-Gypsyism. But there is a tendency, when we talk about Montenegro and our model of multiculturalism, to somehow mix characteristics, roots, and mix the manifestations and effects of anti-Gypsyism. Why is this
Thank you,
relevant?
Daniela.
Because in relevant documents of EU, more and more attention is paid actually to anti-Gypsyism. So if we want to have a successful model of multiculturalism in the future regarding the joining EU now or later or ever, we have to somehow recognize these phenomena in proper way, which means politically and which means legally. And it's one of the main challenges for multiculturalism in the future. And second one, and I will finish, second one means that if the pluralization of Montenegrin society will continue in ethnocultural sense of meaning in terms of immigration, then also the model of multiculturalism has to be, let's say, applied or accommodated to this. So that's
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you very much for your kindness to give me a few more minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. Actually, your speech was more than 15 minutes, so next time you have to stop watch your presentation, okay?
You only 2 minutes from previous conference.
Okay. Now it's stay online because probably you have questions later.
Okay.
Now it's my pleasure to invite Selma. She's calling from Prague. Actually, she is also, her speech will be about the biggest minority in Europe, Roma, but I think she will have different position than Daniela about the anti-Gypsyism, but maybe she will say during her speech. So, Selma, please 10 to 12 minutes because we are out of time. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's start. I'm trying to share my presentation, but since I guess I will be, I'm the last one, so I don't want to take so much time. I think maybe it would be better if I could just share the one of the posts. So let's see here. Yeah. Okay. This one. Yes. Okay, so I'm from Charles University, Faculty of Humanities, Department of Sociology and Civil Society Studies. So I'm a civil society scholar, and I have been focusing in my work the intersection of civil society and various types of vulnerability. And in the last couple of years, maybe even 10 years. I have focused on Roma in the Czech Republic and in Central Europe. So I'm not really focused on the Western Balkans so much. However, I would like to show you here that I was the editor together with my colleague from Institute of Philosophy and Social Theory from Belgrade of the publication Roma in Central and Southeastern Europe, Navigating Muslim Identities, Challenges and Activism, that Rubin also contributed to. And within this publication, there are some things that are related to the Western Balkans, mostly this chapter, which is called Dialogue with Roma Intellectuals, where we selected 4 Roma publicly very famous intellectuals, and 2 of them, actually 3 of them reside in Serbia, 2 of them are migrants from Kosovo, and the 4th one is in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I'm not sure now if it would be that interesting to present each of them specifically and their roles, because we don't have so much time for that. And I will focus on some of the aspects from this publication, but also from the article that I co-authored with my colleague, which was based, focused on Roma women's activism, and then also in relation to religion and so on. So some of these parts will be about that. And my points are very not reflecting so much of what is happening in this, in my opinion, very interesting dialogue, where we actually wanted to amplify their voices, to hear their ideas. And one of the things that we asked about was also the relations with the European Union and the civil society, which I think is something that we also as researchers should focus more on. So, what is that now? The issue of Roma, and in this context, speaking in especially in the Western Balkans, where everything is very complicated, so their identities are also, let's say, multi-layered. When it comes to language, when it comes to ethnicity, when it comes to religion, gender, and so on. And there are a lot of intersections that play out differently in specific contexts. So one of the things that we asked was about political engagement and at which level and what is their experience with that. We received different responses. Some said that it's the best is to engage on the local level, that everything beyond local level is the politics where Roma are usually either used as tokens, abused for gaining votes, or downright like openly rejected in these high levels. And two of these respondents were actually, at the parliament, and one of them was an advisor during the Kosovo negotiations in Rambouillet. So it's not like that they didn't have this experience, but precisely because of this experience, some of them said that being at this level, like higher political level, comes with a lot of baggage. So one of them even said, I feel free in the civil society. I feel more supported in this way than to be the part of the political party and then also be represented in the higher levels of politics. They also mentioned that Roma are very often also used in this context of buying votes, playing out on their poverty. That is one of the, let's say, most important issues here, because poverty is related then to the access to education, housing, and all kinds of opportunities. If we look at from the civil society scholarship, the more people are educated and secure in their economic situation, the more they're likely also to be engaged in civil society organizations. So this is all connected, and then it is difficult for them to be part of this, let's say, political activism, also for these reasons. And because of these layers of identity, it's also the question, what should be the goal of, let's say, something that we call integration policy. But at the same time, there is a lot of rejection, and I can compare this, compare the context of Central Europe, mostly Czech Republic, but also partly Hungary, and the Western Balkans, where basically almost all Roma respondents from the civil society and, let's say, intellectuals and so forth, say that this project of integration failed, and that in a way it hurt Roma quite a lot through disinformation channels that they mentioned. They explained, for example, in Bosnia, the EU came with this project in which they are giving 6 million euros for Roma integration, and the other non-Roma citizens were very concerned that's why are they giving money to them. But then he explained that out of these 6 million, only 10% reaches Roma, and the 60% are the costs of project management and coordination. 30% are conferences and similar activities, which is again something that has been mentioned among Czech Roma as well. For example, with employment projects, where people are employed for that limited time when there is support from the projects, and then nothing happens after that. So this project let's say, problems are something that is crossing the Roma community. And when I say Roma, I'm aware, yes, that it's also Egyptians. Ashkali, one of our respondents, is also the chair of the National Egyptian Union in Serbia. So, and in the Czech Republic also, there are divisions within the Roma community that are very often completely invisible to the outsiders. So when we talk about this specific issue of how the integration process is managed from the EU and the Czech or Western Balkans governments, we see a lot of these holes that are basically like constantly repeating the same model, but not really changing anything. And some of our respondents said even explicitly that there are NGOs and then there are also Roma who are kind of like understand this as their professional activity, and they're interested in changing the situation only for the duration of the project and only in the scope of the project. So they explicitly mentioned that as avoiding systemic changes. And these systemic changes are then related to this pervasive anti-Roma racism that is, again, multi-layered in the Western Balkans. So they, for example, mentioned when we explicitly asked about the relation between the Orthodox Christian Roma and Muslim Roma, one of the respondents said the criterion for us is if we can take or give daughter in marriage, and that is possible between the two communities. But then within those communities, they are not seen as equal to, let's say, Serbian Orthodox Christians or to Bosniak Muslims. One of them even said that in Novi Pazar, which is a part of Serbia that is populated by Bosniaks, where you can find also a lot of Muslims, said that when they tried to organize some Roma activities, they were told that this can be run by Bosniak and not by Roma. And especially is complicated when we go deeply into the religion. There are other interesting articles in this publication that is open access. You can download it and see for yourself, where Roma are not seen as full members of the religious communities that they are dedicated to. So they don't see the problems among themselves, but for example, from the outside, other Muslims like Albanians or Bosniaks or other Orthodox Christians like Serbs for their own communities are also exhibiting this anti-Roma racism.
Selma, please conclude.
Yes?
Please conclude,
What
2
did you
minutes.
say?
Yeah.
Aha. Okay. Okay, then maybe I could say something about the other aspects of the EU cooperation. So when they said when the EU comes, let's say in Serbia, to check on the relevant chapter that is related to Roma integration, that they usually go first to the government and then to non-governmental organizations, some of which are run by Roma, and they explicitly asked them to change the order so that first the NGOs can say what these issues are and then they can take it to the government. That hasn't happened. And they also mentioned that they once had to leave the meeting with the representatives of the European Commission because they had a feeling that they are not really trying to solve any of these systemic issues that we mentioned or take seriously the issues that they, as representatives of the community, are telling them about. So some of them suggested even moving away from the concept of integration towards the concept of security, the security of the community in all its aspects, including economic and social. But for example, one of them mentioned that some hundreds, thousands of Roma do not have access to water, for example, that they see also as a question of security. And that even within when they are represented somewhere, they even speak about Roma who disengage from the Romani community only to emerge as Roma once they think that could become their professional path. So I think there are more issues here related to the EU and a lot of other issues that we discovered while talking to them, but obviously there's not enough time. I don't want to take anyone's space. So thank you for your attention. And if you have any interest in this more to communicate with me, you can feel free to contact me. Thank you.